And so you have this suffering in one way or another coming from God, kind of. I mean, we could debate about how exactly God's involved in it, but even if you wanted to say Satan in Job is the Satan of the New Testament, God still unleashes him and says God's the one who brings up Job. It's not the Satan. Is God says, "Hey, Satan, you look bored. Have you considered my servant Job? Why don't you go cause some suffering for him?" I mean, that's kind of the way it starts. And as you mentioned, Job never finds that out. And so both Job and his friends, I think, are struggling with that. Well, bad things are only supposed to happen to bad people. And so the friends are like, well, Job, you must have done something wrong. But Job, I think, agrees with the friends. Yeah, bad things just happen to bad people, but that's why I can't figure out my own situation. I shouldn't be suffering like this. And so Job wants to plead his case to God and be like, hey, God, this isn't fair. This isn't right. And ultimately, when God comes on the scene, he tells everyone, just be quiet, listen to me. And God never explains why the suffering happens, but he condemns Job and the friends for trying to explain why it happens. I think that's where Job kind of got it wrong, of trying to explain God, trying to explain why this is happening. And God ultimately says, I'm God. You can't understand the way the world works. You can't understand how I'm involved in the world. You can't fully understand what I'm doing. And so I think the answer in Job is, don't try to explain why suffering happens. I think we make that mistake as Christians. We or someone else is suffering and we want to say, well, this is why. And maybe we jump to that free will argument of, well, sin exists, or that's all true. But I think Job cautions us, don't try to explain why, but run to God. In the midst of your suffering, don't try to explain why, but dwell in the presence of God. Allow God to provide peace. Dwell in the love that God has for you. Run to God instead of trying to explain why it's happening or why it shouldn't be happening.